recording. So I was saying that one of the miracles I witnessed of late was as a former student at Amit a couple of years ago, graduated, who was severely wounded on the battlefield, and he was sedated. He was put into a breathing machine, munsham and murdam. I don't remember how to say it in English, and it was very much touch and go. 3 weeks, not even 3 weeks ago. On Friday, I went to get a haircut, and as I walk in, I see some young guy walk out, and he looked familiar. So, oh yeah, that's a former student at Amit. Now, I'm not good remembering names and faces of students I don't have, a real strong kesher with, and I didn't really have a strong kesher with him. So he went away. He was looking like, kind of sad, whatever. And the barber said, "Did you just see the walking miracle?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That's Netanel." I said, "Wait, you mean Nati?" That was the boy. We were all davening for him. I didn't realize they posted a picture of him in the class, in the school group, and because of the injury, didn't look the same. And here's this boy who literally was on death's door not even 3 weeks ago. Here he is walking away on his own volition, no melaved, no one with him, and going back home after getting a haircut. So as horrible as some things have been, and some of the terrible news we've had to suffer through, and families have, and we as a people, we have to also be model hamet. There have been some amazing miracles, and Be'ezrat Hashem, may they continue. Okay, we're going to go right into the PowerPoint. That's not what I want. Not what I want at all. Let's try that again. Screen share. There we go. Okay. This is what I wanted, but I'm actually going to start with the first slide. I wasn't going to mention, but I'll mention it now. I think I had mentioned in passing. I know I mentioned for sure that the difference between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim in davening is that the Ashkenazim make an end at the end of Vayivarach David. It ends. Then the next paragraph is VeCharot imo habrit, which is where we kind of left off last time, and said that the historical reason was that even though it's the middle of a pasuk, so that's where a brit milah very often would take place in shul because of the word brit, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But in addition, there's an additional difference between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim. Ashkenazim stand up by Baruch Hashem L'olam Amen Ve'Amen, which you mentioned, and they don't sit down until after Baruch Hu, which means Vayivarach David, VaYichrot, and VaYosha, Az Yashir, Yishtabach, Kaddish, Baruch Hu, and then they sit down. Sfaradim start Vayivarach David, in the middle of the paragraph, sit down, and don't get up again until Shmona Esrei, right before Shmona Esrei. And the major difference between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim about sitting and standing is for Kaddish. So we know that Ashkenazim, the proper thing to do is when you hear Kaddish, you're supposed to stand. By Sfaradim, it's to sit, which is interesting differences. And maybe when we talk about Kaddish, which we will, Be'ezrat Hashem, we'll get to a little bit of background about why that difference exists. So Sfaradim sit for most of that part, and Ashkenazim stand for all of it. Okay. So where we left off was this paragraph that comes after Vayivarach David, called the VeCharot imo habrit, where it recounts I kind of went through it, I think, last time, the brit, or the covenant made between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael to give us the land. Why was the land of Canaan, which is the ancient name of Israel, why was it called that when there were 7 nations that lived here, by the way, right? So it was Canaan, Chiti, Amori, Prizi, Yebusi. We know the names. Not only that, when you learned Sefer Melachim or Sefer Shmuel near the end, you know that the mountain of Har Moriah was occupied at that time by the Jebusites, so the Yebusim. So David HaMelech and people conquer the mountain of Yevus. Okay, fine. So, but why is the land called Eretz Canaan when there are many other nations that lived here at the time? So the Canaanim were the largest faction, and therefore the land was given the name after the largest group of people. So in any case, so it talks about the brit that was made between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael, that he was going to get rid of the Shivat HaAmamim, the 7 nations, and he was going to keep his promise with the forefathers. What was that? We're going to talk about. He's the one who took us and brought us across the Yam Suf, and he did all these different miracles against Paro and his servants. and you made a name for yourself. We say that Hashem made a name for himself, and he split the sea, and he walked through the dry land. That's the general idea over here of what's going on. So why was it that historically that in the Ashkenazi world, it's not that I know of anywhere done today, although just as I don't know doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but why was it historically they made the Brit Milah at this point in Tefillah? Why? Just because it says the word Brit? I don't know, but I don't think that's the only place that says the word Brit in all of davening. You would have to look back. But there's a reason. Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, all three were given special assurances and promises by Hashem of what's called, for those of you who ever read anything by Rabbi Menachem Liebtag Shlita, brilliant Tanakh scholar, you'll know that he has a theme that he repeats over and over and over in Sefer Breshit called Zera va'aretz. Zera, children, aretz, the land. That you'll see multiple times that Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov are promised that they're going to have children and they're going to have the land of Israel, known as Eretz Canaan at that time. So what was the connection here? So the land of Israel has a brit with Hashem, or Hashem has a brit Am Yisrael about the land, and Hashem made a brit, a covenant with Bnei Israel regarding what we call the Brit Milah. So other than sharing the same word, what is it that it has in connection? So in both cases, if I were to tell you that you're going to go to, I don't know, Italy, and you're going to stand in a plot of land, an earth, and say, this plot of land, this earth is special. What makes it special? I don't know. It's special as of now. Today it's special. There's no Kedusha. There's no holiness to the land in Italy, the United States. There's no Kedusha to land anywhere except in the land of Israel. We know that there's, I'm not going to go on a tangent here now about the Kedusha Haaretz and the non-Kedusha outside Eretz Yisrael, but that the holiness of the land is very special. But what's the difference? Theoretically, just think about it for a second. I go in my backyard, into the Gina, into the garden, and I scoop up a shovel, a little bit of earth, and I put it in a cup. And then I go to, say, Italy. I don't know why I keep calling on Italy. And I go there and I scoop up some earth, and I put each one in a cup. Earth is earth. Okay, yeah, it'll be different minerals and fine, I know. But earth, dirt is dirt. Different consistency, maybe different color, but it's dirt. But the difference being that something that's so base, so nothing, so plain, Hashem, with Am Yisrael, made a special brit, a special covenant, and declared that holy. And because Hashem declared it holy, I should correct one thing. It's not that when you're in Chutz La'aretz, the land of a cemetery doesn't have kedusha, but in order for it to be used as a cemetery, there's a certain procedure. It's called consecration of the land in English. It was done here in Ma'ale Adumim a number of years ago when they consecrated the land for the cemetery in Mishor Adumim. It involves a whole bunch of steps, which if you're interested someday, I'll be happy to explain. But so Hashem took something that was just dirt, and somehow, through Hashem's statements and the creation, made that this land have special holiness. The Brit Milah on the male body takes something that represents the animalistic portion of the male body, of the human, and it was infused with Kedusha. It was taking something that's base, something that's very animalistic, let's say, if we use that terminology, and I don't mean it in a bad way. For those of you who learn Tanya, you know what I'm talking about more, in the animalist, and raise it to a level of Kedusha. So therefore, there's a very direct connection between the Brit Milah and the Brit of the land on two things. Number one is the two things Hashem promised our Avot, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And on the other hand, it also took something very plain, I'm putting that in quotes, and infused it with something of Kedusha. Both cause birth. Both cause birth or bring about life. The earth is referred to in feminine form because it's like the mother. It gives birth to the trees, the plants, the food, and everything else. There's all kinds of ways we will see in in piyutim and in literature and in the Torah itself, of that the earth itself is looked at as the mother. We even use the expression in English, Mother Earth. And that's really, they kind of stole it, of course, from Judaism. In any case, so that's one of the reasons historically that would stop at this point in the Tefillah and do a brit. So let's go down a couple lines. So you see in the red, it says, Vateret oni avoteinu. By the way, I want to point out something to you that I mentioned a few weeks ago. Under the ayin, I'm going to make it very big for a second. Under the ayin, you'll see it's a chataf kamatz, okay, which is I mentioned that the patach rather, the kamatz with the two dots next to it, the kamatz with the shva next to it, is almost 99% of the time is pronounced like an O, not O, like the letter O in English, and not O, but it's a combination like an O. So it's vatera et oni avotenu. You do not ever say et ani avotenu, because that would not be right. So in any case, it says that you saw what? You look at the English, it says you saw the affliction of our fathers in Egypt. And keep in mind, this is the prelude to leading into VaYosha, and then into VaYosha Hashem, and then into Az Yeshem. This is all leading up to the splitting of the Reed Sea, which we're going to come to, not tonight. Doubtful. In any case, so what does it mean, oni? Now, he translates this here properly, or maybe rather improperly, as affliction. That's not really the right translation. I can make an argument that it is the right translation because that they were afflicted in Mitzrayim. But there's another meaning here, and it's a much deeper meaning. It does not mean necessarily suffering. It doesn't mean, but rather means for the word to be an ani, which means be poor. What do I mean poverty? It was spiritual poverty. We know that one of the timing factors of Bnei Yisrael leaving Mitzrayim when they did had to do with the fact that they were on what was known as the 49th level down out of 50 of spiritual impurity. And Hashem had to, all these are metaphors and these are anthropomorphic and also, you know what I'm saying, had to take them out before they would be at the 50th level. Because if they reached the 50th level of tum'ah, of spiritual impurity, then they were gone. They were toast. Nothing would be able to happen. So on the one hand, you could say, yes, it means that Hashem saw the suffering and the affliction. We even use that expression in the Haggadah. But there's another meaning here, that it is that they saw that the spiritual poverty that we were at, and that he had to take us out of Mitzrayim. And what happens? The couple lines down at the end, he gave signs and wonders against Paro, and all of his servants, and all the people of his land. Because, what does that mean? You knew they acted, what's the English here? Malevolently. I don't usually use that sentence, malevolently, but it means they did it very severely. The word like mezid, to do something on purpose. So what is going on here? There is a theological question that one could potentially ask. At the Brit Ben Abitarim, now this is now you're going to understand why this is mentioned now. This is talking at the beginning of this paragraph about the Brit Ben Abitarim. It's the first time really where there's this promise of Zera va'aretz, the land and children. And in the Brit Ben Abitarim, Avraham Avinu says to Hashem, Bama eda ki irashem. How do I know I'm going to inherit the land? Now, I had heard a shiur from Rabbi J.J. Schachter years ago with multiple explanations of what was it Avraham was really saying. Because you can't say he didn't believe God, like, oh, come on, how am I supposed to believe that? That's not what he was saying at all. And maybe he's done Nut in a Parshat Lech Lecha one year, we'll talk about it. But at that moment, Hashem is telling him about Zera va'aretz, and so he says, "Bama idaki rashena." How do I know I'm going to actually inherit the land, or my children will? Hashem says, "Yadoa," and you know the pasuk because we say it in the Haggadah also. "Yadoa tidaki geryeh zaracha be'eretz lo lahem." You should surely know that your children are going to be slaves in the strange land. Ve'inotam va'avadu ma'aba me'ot shana, and they're going to cause them problems and pain and suffering for 400 years. And then they're going to go out eventually with a great amount of stuff. And we know it's not 400 years, it's 210 years. And it's just over 80 years of actual true avdut, of slavery. And then what happens? He says, "V'gamet goya sheyavodu dan anochi." Hashem says in Brit Ben Abtarim, and we quote it again in the Haggadah, that and I will judge the people that took you and enslaved you. Good theological question, huh? that's the essence of the question. Hashem says and promises Abraham, his people are going to be strangers in a strange land. They're going to be put in slavery, and then afterwards, Hashem's going to punish them for taking the Jews and putting them in slavery. Why? Why? How is that okay? So this is the answer here. Kiadata, ki hezidu alehem. What happened? Why did he do all these muftim, all these wonders and miracles against the Egyptians and other makot and everything else he did? Because yes, remember the Torah does not ever say the Egyptians are the ones who are going to enslave the Jews. It was their choice, right? There's nowhere that Hashem says the Egyptians are going to say, to be strangers in a strange land. Second of all, there was a predetermined, quote unquote, amount of slavery and problems and pain and suffering the Jews would have to go through. And the Egyptians did it mahajin the mahajin. What do I mean? They went way above and beyond. And because they went way above and beyond, Hashem says that they're going to do that I'm also going to judge them. What are they being judged on? If they had theoretically only done certain levels of pain and suffering to the Jews, I don't know what would have happened after that. Would they have gone out? They would have gone out Berechush Gadol with a lot of stuff because Hashem promised. But would all these makot have happened to them? Wouldn't seem so. At least not based on this particular pasuk, where it says, and that's one of the reasons why we use this pasuk here in this section having to do with the Brit about the land of Israel. Then we say something interesting. It says, "V'hayam v'zbatas rashen kayom hazeh," right? That you made for yourself a name on that day. We have to remember that everything that occurs in this world that is positive and shines well for the Jewish people, every time that there is something when we do a Kiddush Hashem, every time when something good happens by the Jews, for the Jews, it also magnifies Hashem's name and the knowledge of Hashem in this world. I'm sure you saw some of you the thing that happened in Turkey last week, where this guy in Parliament, in Turkish Parliament, was talking about how Allah's wrath is going to come down on the Jews because of and also on the Turkish Parliament because they're helping Israel, whatever it might be. And he says something about the wrath of Allah, and he fell and he had a heart attack on the spot, and a day later he died. I don't know if you also saw that today. I don't think it's recent. I think I've seen this before. There was a speaker in, I don't remember which country, it might have been Indonesia, I don't even remember anymore. He was on a platform, on a stage, and he's railing against Israel, railing against the Jews, and he said, if I'm wrong, may the entire stage I'm on collapse. And as he says it, the whole stage collapsed and a whole bunch of people were hurt. Okay? Now that's the magnification of Hashem's name also. We may not realize it, but it's like Hashem's name is being magnified. Look, you see, you don't want to mess with Hashem. Now, yes, we can make all kinds of other arguments and theological arguments, which is not for now. But we also say that after Hashem did all this section here of Hashem heard the cries and did the Ototim Muftim and did the wonders and everything else because of what they were, then we come to this prelude to the splitting of the Reed Sea. Vayam bakata lifnehem. It's not a prelude, it's like it's a foreshadowing of what's really coming up in a couple paragraphs. Vayam bakata lifnehem. You split the sea before them. Vayavu b'tochayam bayabasha. You brought them through the sea on dry land. Now I'm going to talk about that for a couple of minutes because this expression, this word, this phraseology comes up again very soon in David. But I do want to make one comment. You will notice, and thankfully, Safari uses the right word in English. The Yam Suf is mistranslated, and I'll tell you how in a minute, as the Red Sea, which is you'll even see it on maps in Hebrew, Yam HaAdom. It doesn't mean that at all. Yam Suf means the Sea of Reeds. It's the Reed Sea. It has to do with the mistranslation, the Bible, all kinds of other historical reasons. But it's definitely not the Red Sea. It has nothing to do with the color red, nothing to do with blood. It has nothing at all. So it's the Sea of Reeds or the Reed Sea. I remember that one of the first times I said it in Chicago in Shul when I was speaking early on in my career. I said something about the Reed Sea, and afterwards a couple of people came out like, "What are you talking about? The Reed Sea? It's red." The implication was, "Don't you know how to read English?" They didn't say that, but they said it nicely. But no, it's the Sea of Reeds. Suf is the reeds. Anyway, so let's go back to this. It says here, look at the words. Vayavru betoch hayam. You cross them through the sea, bayabasha, on the dry land. Okay, so let me show you something really interesting. Okay, there are two psukim that we find before Az Yashir. By the way, when we come to Az Yashir, there's a machloket if it's Az Yashir or Az Yashir. Okay, there's some very big grammarians who say it's Az Yashir, but we'll come to that whenever we do. It says as follows: Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, "Vatan haremet matacha, raise your staff, unteat yadcha al hayam, raise your staff, and put it over the sea and split it." And then it says, "Vayavo bnei Yisrael betoch hayam, vayabasha." Bnei Yisrael went into the water onto the dry land, which is what it says here. Vayavu betoch hayam, vayabasha. Remember, these are psukim from Nehemiah. Now we have the next pasuk, just a couple psukim later. It tells us what happens. Uvnei Yisrael alchu vayabasha betoch hayam. That's not what it said before. It said here the Jews went into the water onto dry land. Then when it records that's that we're supposed to do. And then when it records that they actually did it says, and the Jewish people walked on the dry land in the water. So which is it? What do you mean? Oh, it doesn't make a difference. They went on who cares? They went on the dry land. No. Everything in the Torah is meduyak. It's very precise. And what's the precision here? So Rashi and other commentaries tell us as follows: that those people who were true ma'amini, who truly believed that the sea was not going to stand in their way, or now we're not talking about Nachshon ben Aminadab, other people also, would start to go into the water even before it completely split and before the land was dry for them to walk on. They went betoch hayam, and then it became the yabasha as they walked on. The others were a little bit like, I'm not so sure. Let me wait and see what happens to Harry up there, and what happens to Steve and to Michael and to all these other people ahead of me in line. Those people, halchu bayabasha, they went on the dry land, betoch hayam, inside the sea. And it says for that point, at that point, v'amayim lahem chuma, the waters became for them like walls, miminam umismola, to their right and to their left. So it's important to understand that the Torah tells us something and repeats it. And it happens in many cases. Sometimes it's within the same parasha. Sometimes it's many svarim apart. You'll see something in Shemot and you'll see it again in Dvarim. And it's a slight, biggest one you probably all would be familiar with is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat LeKadesho, right? Remember the Shabbat to keep it holy. And then you have Shamor et Yom HaShabbat LeKadesho. You have the to keep and to remember, Zachor v'Shamor, right? So we said B'dibur Echad, that's what we say in the beginning of the Chadodi. Hashem said both of those at the same time. I'm going to put myself on mute for 1 second, if you don't mind. Just had to take care of a little something there for a second. Okay, let's go back to the slides. Okay. Okay, so let's just finish up this last piece here and say what happened as a result. They go through the water on the dry land, and their pursuit, those who chased them, you threw them into the depths like a stone into mighty waters. Now, it's significant, that pasuk, because when we get to Az Yashir, we will see that there are 3 different descriptions of how the Egyptians drowned. And right here is just telling us one thing. It's just telling us they sunk like stone, or they were thrown into the depths like stone into mighty waters. So keep that in the back of your head when we get to the Az Yashir short. Okay. Let's take a look at VaYosha. There's something I skipped here. Let me just see which it was. No. Okay, I'm going to skip that slide. It's fine. decided against it. Okay, let's take a look at the next paragraph. Now, this now comes from Shemot, and it's just before the splitting of the sea, which is, sorry, it's just before the Az Yashim. VaYosha Hashem Bayom God, by the way, I know I've said this before, but I'll repeat myself. When you say a pasuk partially and you stop in the middle to translate, say Hashem instead of saying Hashem's actual name. If I read the entire pasuk, you could say Hashem's name, but I'm stopping in the middle to translate. VaYosha Hashem Bayom Yisrael Mitzrayim. That day Hashem delivered Bnei Yisrael from the Egyptians. Vayar Yisrael et Mitzrayim met asafat hayam. And the Jews saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea. Vayar Yisrael et hayad gedolah. And the Bnei Yisrael saw the hand, the powerful hand, wondrous hand, sherasa Hashem Mitzrayim, that God did against the Egyptians, or against the Egyptians. Vayiru am et Hashem. The people had fear, or better translation here, awe of Hashem. Vayaminu b'Hashem, and they believed in God. Uv Moshe avdo, and Moshe his servant. So a couple things here. Don't you think the Jews believed in God before this? So Arya is shaking his head no. And the answer is you're probably right that unfortunately we have seen so many times in Jewish history the Jews of the "what have you done for me lately" syndrome. We see that throughout Sefer Shemot. We see it in Bamidbar. And what's his business? They believed in Hashem and in Moshe, his servant. What's going on here? So I want to share with you a Rambam that has, actually it's a paragraph that's based on the Rambam, and from a shiur given by, let me get it up here on the screen, by Rav Daniel Asor. I checked into him, and I meant to give you a little bio, and I forgot. You have to take my word for it right now. Okay. Let's actually, before we look at the actual slide, let's just talk for a minute. Probably one of the more important topics in general, but especially right now, this time what we're going through, is the topic of emunah, topic of faith, belief in Hashem, what Hashem does is right and is just. I'm not going to give you the whole 30-minute class I gave the other day for ACI and for Leslie Kaplan's group. But if you're interested, I'm happy to share. Or maybe I shared it in the group. I don't remember anymore. But there's one point I do want to make, and that is that something that is said in the Gemara on more than one occasion, and that is Kol da Abed Rachman Letav Abed, that everything Hashem does, He does for the good. So in Hebrew we say that also that Nachum Ish Gamzu was known as Nachum Ish Gamzu because he always would say Gamzu Latov. This is also for the good. Notice, and this is the critical understanding here, is it doesn't say Gamzu Tova. This is also good. It's Gamzu Letova. It doesn't mean it's good now, but it will be for the good. In the future, it will be good. We see a few stories the Gemara gives us about Rabbi Akiva, on more than one occasion where he sees things happen and he says Gamzu Letova. But if you're interested, if I didn't post it, please let me know and I'll send it on to you. But here we're seeing that the Jews over and over and over have witnessed miracle after miracle. And what happened when it comes time to leave Egypt? Right? They decide they're going to stay. Sorry, I keep always picking on Teaneck. They're going to stay in Teaneck. Okay, they're not going to go to Israel. They're going to stay behind. Yeah, it's fine here. Don't worry about it. We got free watermelon. It's good. It's really good. So what happens? We know that a certain percentage of Jews died in Choshech. I know that there is a midrash, and it's quoted a lot, that 4/5 of the Jewish people died at that point. I have a hard time accepting that and saying that that's necessarily accurate and not some form of a guzma or an exaggeration. But maybe at some point I can look into it a little bit more. But in any case, as Aryeh was shaking his head and saying, and I was agreeing with you, Aryeh, that no, at some point, the Jews still didn't have complete emunah in Hashem. Comes to this point of the splitting of the Red Sea, and now it says, "Vayamiru Hashem u'Moshe avdo." They believed in Hashem and Moshe's servant. Okay, so it would seem they've crossed, pardon the pun, a watershed moment, right? And now they've gone They've gone over to the other side, literally and figuratively, and their emunah has been strengthened, not only in God, but Moshe Rabbeinu, his servant as well. So let's take a look at this interesting piece I came across from Rav Asor. I'm going to read it to you. Harambam Mehilchot Yisodei Torah Shoel. The Rambam in the halachot dealing with the fundamental principles of Torah, right at the beginning of the Rambam, he asks, Madua lachar shekvar am Yisrael higia lichlal emunah b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. Why is it that since the Jewish people had already arrived at a point of complete faith in Hashem and in Moshe his servant, b'kvot nes ha'hatzalah midei hatzava mitzri, as a result of the miraculous salvation from the Egyptian army, sheradaf acharehem, that ran after them, lehorgam, to kill them, lechanes chatzayat hayam, and after the miracle of the splitting of the sea, at that point we know it said, I just read it to you, vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. They believed in Hashem and Moshe his servant. If that's the case, asks the Rambam, madua yesh tzorach b'pasuk haba sheomer she'Hashem leMoshe. What's the reason that this next pasuk, which comes up, he's about to quote, that I put in bold, which comes from Parshat Yitro? What does it say in Parshat Yitro, which takes place after the splitting of the Red Sea? Yom Hashem el Moshe, and Hashem said to Moshe, I'm going to come to you in a cloud, in order that the people should hear me talking with you. And they should also believe in you forever. Wait a minute. Would you just believed in Moshe? The Torah gives testimony that Bnei Yisrael had faith, complete faith in Moshe Rabbeinu. They believed in him. They had emunah. So now we go ahead in Parshat Yitro. Hashem says, "Look, I'm going to talk to you. To Bnei Yisrael, they're going to hear it, and they're going to have faith in you." They already said it. Do. In Kvar Eminu, if they already believed in God, in Moshe, why do they have to have a repeat performance, a broadcast? They already did believe in it. So let's take a look what he says. Move this down a little. Okay. Rambam Megalalanu, I'll make it a little bigger for you, so you may have trouble seeing it. Rambam Megalalanu et hayesod chashuv yoter. The Rambam clarifies or he reveals to us an exceedingly important fundamental principle in Judaism, she'alav omedet hadat v'ha'emunah ha'yehudit, upon which our religion and the faith of our religion really rests. The Rambam clarifies, Shelokim lo ratza levases et emunato al nisim. God did not want our faith based on miracles. Va'afilu lo al nisim gedolim, and not even on gigantic miracles. Uvein lu'miim, and international things, kimo kriyat yam suf, bahem amachad toveh bayam, ve'amachad nitzal ad achron shabahem. Hashem didn't want, says the Rambam, that our faith in Hashem should be based on the fact that he did this miraculous thing. He split the sea, and some people drowned, and the other people, the Egyptians, the other people were saved, the Jews. Because a person who believes only based on miracles, after a while, he may have a little doubt in his heart. And with the distance or passage of time, other doubts creep in regarding the miracle. Was that really Hashem's hashgacha, as they say? Or was it just happenstance? Was this really a miracle of God? Or some kind of magic? So Rambam says Hashem did not want our perpetual emunah to be based on miracles. Hashem didn't want our religion and our emunah to be based on miracles. What did Hashem want? What's happening in Parshat Yitro is the first revelation of Hashem to Am Yisrael, the entire Am Yisrael at Har Sinai. Hashem wanted a national testimony and witnessing of the revelation of Hashem. Both called Am Yisrael Yuyu Edim, that all of Am Yisrael will be witnesses, L'hitgalut Eloki, to the revelation of God, or the godly revelation, and Ma'amad Har Sinai, when they stood at Har Sinai. Chol Am Yishma Yit'alu L'madregat Nevi'im, and all the people would be elevated to the level at that moment only of prophets. And all the people would hear the voice of God. Not like a group of people, some people here, some people there. That everyone heard Hashem's voice at the exact same moment. One of the classic, I don't like to use the word arguments, but I'll say it anyways. One of the classic arguments of the differences in the basis or bases of the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is the initial revelation by Islam. They believe that Muhammad went up on his donkey, very fitting, by the way, went up on his donkey, went up to the heavens and got the Quran, and then came back and he started to spread the word. Christians believe that Yeshu, Jesus, was revealed himself to a few people. He came back from the dead. He revealed himself to a few people, and from there it spread to more after the apostles, and on and on and on. What do we have? We don't have a hitgalut or a revelation of one person or one person with a small group, but rather with millions of people. For those of you who are not familiar with Rabbi Daniel Mechanic, who speaks around the world for Aish, A-I-S-H, Aish in Yerushalayim, I would recommend that you go online, look on YouTube, and look for him, Rabbi Daniel Mechanic, spelled just like a car mechanic, and look at some of his videos of how do we know we are right? How do we know the Jewish people are right? How do we know that, maybe Christianity is right? Maybe it's not. Obviously, it's not. What I'm saying is that listen to how he speaks and makes this talk, makes this point specifically. And it's a very strong point. So the fact is that you can, if 50 people had witnessed Har Sinai, if 100 people had witnessed Har Sinai, it'd be very simple for that over the course of time to be, yeah, sure, 100 people saw it. Give me a break. But when millions of people witnessed Har Sinai, and it's passed down from, we're at over 3,300 and almost 40 years since the giving of the Torah. And yes, of course, we have heretics, we have people who don't believe, we have people who don't believe something that happened on October 7th. So obviously something that happened almost 3,500 years ago, for sure they're not going to believe. But in any case, we have and will always have this, what's called a national memory. And this national memory is that of Har Sinai. And to this, let's go back to the slide for a second. And it is to this that the Rambam is talking about, that Hashem wanted us to have this edut leumit hitgalut elokit, a national witnessing of the godly revelation. Now, if we look back now at this paragraph, VaYosha Hashem bayomahu, we can understand that this is the one step. The one step being they believed in Hashem and Moshe because of all the miracles that happened until this point, including, this is already, so to speak, after, not so to speak, it is after the Yam Suf is split, the Reed Sea is split, and that's so, but it still is a result of miracles. So therefore, the Rambam says, it's once again, Hashem says he wants the Bnei Yisrael to believe in Moshe, because here it doesn't say, Hashem said, believe in me and Moshe. This just says it was a result of the splitting of the sea. Now Hashem says to Moshe, I want to speak to you. I want all of Am Yisrael to hear it. I want all these witnesses so they'll believe in me and in you. And it won't be because of miracles. It'll be because they have a national memory together of Am Yisrael and Hashem speaking. Now, okay, I want to show you, I'm gonna kind of end with this tonight as a prelude to Az Yashir. For those of you who've never looked in a Sefer Torah, you can open up, you can go to Sefer Torah and see it, or you can open up many Tanakh books, and you'll find those that, especially those that have like a tikkun for practicing to read from the Torah. It'll show you how it's actually written in the Torah. It's not written like most of the Torah, not all the Torah. Most of the Torah written just in straight lines, but rather it's written. We're gonna see next week the expression that's used has to do like brickwork, which we're gonna understand a little bit next week. But it's written that in 3 columns. The picture didn't come out the greatest, but it's basically you have a word on the side, another word or phrase on the side, and then the full sentence in the middle. Zekeli van vehu. And we're going to go through some of the psukim, not all of them. This is my God, and I will adorn him. Markavot Paro Chelo Yaravayan, the chariots of Paro and his soldiers sunk into the water. Everything here is a full sentence, except, interestingly enough, when you come to the very last line, and it's not written well, this particular picture didn't come out. It should say, that those words are really here in the center. So why is it that after the entire Az Yashir, every single line, the middle is a full sentence, but in the last line, it's a partial sentence. Bnei Yisrael walked in the dry land in the middle of. So now, if you take a look, you'll have the word here, Hayam, which means the sea, and over here has the word the sea. It's giving us in visual form what happened to the Jews when they walked. It says, Bnei Yisrael walked on the dry land in the middle of what? The Yam. We said before, it was Mimi Namu Mistolam. The waters were like a wall on the right-hand side of them and on the left-hand side. Why is it written in this way? Was this said only by Moshe? It says, as Yashir Moshe uvnei Yisrael. Why is it as Yashir in future tense? Do we learn anything from that? It should be as Shar Moshe or VaYashar Moshe. Like we know that the idea that Vayomer, Vayelech, where they take the future tense and make it past, we talked about that already. So as Yashir is a future tense, literally a future tense. Why is it set up this way? What is the meaning of the words in some of these psukim? Why does it say different types of ways that the Egyptians drowned? And in addition to that, when we look at this, we're going to see the vast majority of the psukim have nothing to do with the splitting of the sea at all. They have to do with the Egyptians. That's kind of weird. And the final question is, why is it said every single day of the year? Now, by Adot Mizrach, there's some who have a custom that on so Shmini Atzeret, I think it was. I'm trying to remember that they say Ha'azinu instead of the Shira from the beginning of Ha'azinu instead of Az Yashir. But basically, every single day this is said as part of the Tefillah. Why? Why is this mentioned? And why now, shortly before Yishtabach? The answer to some of these questions, not necessarily all of them, we'll touch Bezrat Hashem next week. Let me just double check the calendar before I say anything else. Double check. Next week, next Sunday night, Bezrat Hashem is the 24th to 12th of Kislev. So, I mean, Tevet, we should be okay. Bezrat Hashem. So until then, we wish you a good week. Shavua Tov, Nesorot Tovot, everybody. Be well.